Executive Director of United Way of Monroe County. And this series is in collaboration with IU's PACE, Political and Civic Engagement Program. We're ever grateful for our co-collaborators. And it's also, this whole series this season is in thanks to several sponsors that I want to acknowledge, including the Bloomington Township. And I see Trustee Kim Alexander is here with us today. The Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, IU Credit Union, Old National Bank, and Duke Energy. Let's give a virtual round of applause to our sponsors who help make sure that this program can come to you every second Thursday of the month throughout 2021. And you know, we have a theme for 2021. It's all about building a better normal for our community following COVID. Because even before the pandemic, about half of our community it was struggling. We have about 1 in 5 households in poverty, federally defined poverty, and we have another 1 in 3 in what United Way calls the ALICE category. ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. And so, you know, families and households who are working, have some income, but it's really just above that threshold of poverty. And because of that, they're not eligible for a lot of assistance programs. And so, you know, it's an area United Way really tries to engage in because, you know, folks may not have a lot of assets saved up, as the acronym implies. And so, you know, one hurdle in the road, like a car repair, a health crisis, can send families spiraling. And that's what we're trying to prevent. And, you know, with the pandemic, a lot of folks lost income, lost, you know, their hours at work. And we're just now starting to see how that truly has impacted evictions and, you know, people's ability to pay rent and mortgage and utilities on their house, because there has been a moratorium. Our panel will talk all about that and tell us what they're seeing, what they anticipate, and field your questions. So to introduce our panel, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Fraley from IU PACE, who's going to be the facilitator this morning. And again, introduce yourselves in the chat box. Any resources or things that you want to put there, we welcome. But if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature and we'll try to get to all of those today. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Efra, and it's wonderful to see so many of you here. And you know, I certainly look forward to what I hope is a near future, and when we can see a lot of you in person. You know, so we're doing this virtually through COVID, and you know, COVID has determined a lot of the conditions that we're in here right now, and has shaped a lot of the discussion that we're having today. You know, in fact, we had a United Way panel back in the pre-COVID days, I suppose, on evictions, and I feel like we're approaching this anew as an entirely new topic in some ways, just because the entire environment, the political environment, the economic environment, and clearly the health environment is shaped to the issue in completely different ways. And so I am grateful to be here with you, grateful that all of you are here, and certainly grateful to our panelists. We have with us today Tonda Radewan, and Tonda is with the Housing and Eviction Prevention Project. We have Judge Catherine Stafford, Monroe County Circuit Court Judge, and Amy Harrison with Beacon. And so we are certainly grateful that all three of them, you know, they're all busy folks, have a lot going on. So we're grateful that they are generous with their time and able to spend that with us today. We are going to, as usual, for those who have been with us regularly, you know, we'll start with some questions that we'll throw to our panelists, and then we also want to make sure that this is a participatory environment. So in order to do that, so you know, the chat is a good place to be able to, you know, make comments, suggest resources, and to introduce yourself. But we also have a Q&A function. You'll notice that you have a Q&A function. If you wish to pose a question to the panelists, please use the Q&A function. That's what we'll be monitoring for any questions that you might have. So again, thank you for your presence today. And I'm going to start off, this is the title of the session for today is, are we living in an eviction tsunami, right? And this is obviously, as Efrat mentioned, we've had some moratoriums on evictions as a result of COVID. And as those moratoriums expire, there are a great many concerns about families that are at risk of facing eviction. And so I want to check into our panelists today and see where we are and where are we? and are we seeing a lot of families at risk at eviction coming at the end of these moratoriums? So I'll turn that over to the panelists, how you wish to respond.
Well, I can talk briefly about the number of evictions that are typically filed in Monroe County, and then kind of where we were from 2019 to 2020, if that would be helpful. We typically have 700 to 800 evictions filed per year in Monroe County. I crunched some numbers, and let me just check my other screen here and make sure I've got it. In 2019, we had a total of 812 evictions filed. In 2020, that went down to 559. And the biggest drop was in the second quarter, which of course is when COVID hit and when the courts closed and then the clerk's office closed, and it made it almost impossible to file. So we had a big drop in evictions in 2020, and it's kind of too soon to tell for 2021. We've still got the CDC moratorium in place that expires here at the end of the month. It's been found unconstitutional in Texas, but that's not binding on us here in Indiana yet. So our typical rule as judges is that until our jurisdiction has found something unconstitutional, we follow it. And so we are. And we're following the advice of the Indiana Landlord Tenant Task Force in terms of how we've changed many things about how we handle eviction cases. But I'm really wishing I had a crystal ball to tell you all what would be happening with eviction filings in April.
So I have, I guess, a somewhat different perspective because I'm with the Housing and Eviction Prevention Project. I'm answering the phone. We have hours that we provide attorneys, mediator services, and then referrals to agencies and organizations that are existing that can assist people. And so with that, functioning in that role, I'm receiving a lot of calls from people, from parents, from individuals that are feeling desperate because they're worried that they're going to be homeless, that they're going to not have the resources that they need for especially for parents with children. And so I guess because that phone is ringing all the time, even outside of the regular staffed hours, I feel that there are a lot of people that are in need and they don't know what those solutions are. So it's a different perspective. I don't have that larger view scope that Judge Stafford and some of the other people have. I'm the person that's answering the phone, trying to connect people to resources. That's one of the reasons why I'm so glad to see Amy here. She has a lot of information about the emergency rental assistance program that's come through. And so the people that have come on and that are joining this morning, I think hopefully will walk away with some solutions and some resources for those of us in the community that really aren't sure what the answers are, but we've been working really hard to try to find one and help people in need.
To piggyback on that, so we've been awarded money from the state, from the CARES Act, and we can help people from last April that have been affected by COVID in some way, whether they lost their job, they can't go to work because their kids are homeschooled right now with e-learning, or they've had COVID and can't go to work or are affected medically and those kind of things. So what we've done is with that money, we have been able to help people get caught up on their rent. We can pay at the start in the first round, we were awarded money to help people with their past due rent and then rent going forward for up to 6 months. And now it's, if there's still a need after 6 months, we can reassess with the individuals and the families to have up to 9 or 12 months of their rent paid. So that's all been in the works. And I have been working with, I believe in our region, in Region 10, which is Monroe County, Morgan County, Greene County, Lawrence County, and Martin County, we've had between 90 and 100 families that we've helped, between Beacon and New Hope, who also has funding for this program. So, and it's ongoing, and it can go on through September, depending on, we're still getting applications from the state, so, and working through those.
Wow. So yeah, this is certainly very fascinating and very tragic. To hear a lot of the things that you're seeing. So Tonda, you mentioned that you're there, and anyone can answer this, but you mentioned you're there answering the phones, and you're hearing directly from a lot of the people who are facing these situations, and and this is of course Amy, from this as a member of the service provider community, and Judge Stafford, I mentioned that you're also hearing a lot of different perspectives as well. But I'd be curious, like, what is a typical story that you might hear, when someone is following up and looking for resources?
I would say the most typical is that somebody is behind on rent because they lost their job, or their hours were cut or reduced because they were in a service related industry, whether it was food service, some type of direct service related industry that was no longer in business, or their business was reduced because of people not going out in the public, or reducing their the amount of exposure that they had out in the public. And so with reduced hours or cut jobs, maybe some of the people would be eligible for unemployment and applied and were able to get caught up through PUA that came through, or unemployment, but maybe maybe they didn't qualify, or when the additional funds ended, they were falling farther behind. They were looking for jobs, they were trying to work, those jobs weren't available, or they were available but not at the level that was needed to pay their rent, because the income that you can make in certain sectors doesn't match the cost to live in those same sectors that you're working in those same areas. And so people would fall behind, and they might not qualify for this. I don't know, the typical, to summarize, the typical situation would be someone lost their job or their hours reduced. They didn't have enough money to pay rent. They then were being threatened with eviction because they weren't able to pay their rent, and they were not sure what resources they could find in the community, and they were worried that they were no longer going to have a home. So non-payment of rent, and then lease violations started to come up more when you couldn't get evicted for non-payment of rent. So there was a definite uptick in the amount of claims that were filed that noted lease violations, where they might have not noted them in a situation where you couldn't evict someone for non-payment.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just had a person that we had helped with 6 months, and they had called me and said, I'm not getting my unemployment anymore. And so they're behind on their rent again. So we get there, we find out how much money they have and how much we can help with. And I can put a request for extension and help them with another 3 months at a time. So, I mean, we have that safety net there, but they're already in the program. So yeah, there's a lot. And I think I've had several people that have actually had COVID and can't go back to work right now. And so they have lost their income and they have children and their kids are home. And so, yeah, that's been a big issue too. So
I would say that I guess behind that, the majority of the calls that I'm getting, or mostly the referrals that are coming in from other service providers in the community, we're often now getting calls for people that are trying to help their clients find housing. And many of those clients that they're not able to find housing for have a prior eviction on their record. And so that has been one of the largest barriers that people have had is even if they weren't evicted, there's the eviction case, small claims case that's filed. They're trying to fill out applications for housing in a market that's already very competitive. And they're getting turned down because of a credit check or a prior eviction. I think one of, and this might be a good lead to Judge Stafford, is one of the goals of the project and the courts was to try to come up with an alternative for the landlords and the tenants for a voluntary surrender agreement or other options to keep that eviction judgment off of someone's record. I think that has been one of the major goals that were achieved, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. If I can just kind of echo there, the first Indiana moratorium on evictions prevented evictions for any reason. There was no exception for waste or what is the legal term for damage to the unit. However, subsequent eviction moratoria have allowed evictions for any reason other than non-payment. So if there's a lease violation like damage to the unit, or that unfortunately still happens, people manufacturing meth in the unit, or somebody has a mental health disorder and there are problems with other tenants, or they have a pet who is biting other people, or whatever that concern might be. Or occasionally I do see landlords claiming an emergency when I would not necessarily agree with that, and I don't set it as an emergency. Judge Crothy and I hear almost all the evictions in Monroe County. She and I each hear half of them, and it's up to us to whether to define an eviction as an emergency or not. And if it's an emergency, we're required by state law to hear it within 3 days, within 3 business days. If it's a non-emergency, so non-payment is never an emergency. But if they come up with another reason that's an emergency, we would have to hear that in 3 days. So there have been cases where I've seen an uptick in the number of so-called emergency evictions. I think most landlords are being very responsible about it, but there are some exceptions. If that helps clarify the difference. And that's one of the reasons I'm so grateful that we were able to get HEP started actually the summer before COVID hit. And I'm so grateful to the project participants in that, which are the District 10 Pro Bono Project and Justice Unlocked, providing legal services to both tenants and unrepresented landlords in advance of their hearing, at the hearing, but before I hear the case, and to the services of the Community Justice and Mediation Center, which provides mediation services right then and there for free between the landlords and the tenants. And then Tonda Radewan meets with them, and as part of a checkout process, tries to see if there's anywhere else she can send them for more resources. And that's been incredible to have already in place pre-COVID. I'm extremely fortunate and grateful that we have that service in place.
That is helpful.
Yeah, wow, this is super important information, and thank you for all of those resources. And this is something that we want to be able to send out to folks so that you can be sure to know how that you can contribute to whatever it is that they're doing, or how you can be helpful to folks. Obviously, we want to encourage people to engage and volunteer and be active in the issues that we're discussing. And so there are tons of resources that are here. We've got some questions that are coming in, and Amy, I know that since you mentioned Beacon and New Hope had received some money from the CARES Act, we've got a question from Liz Feidel. This is, how much money was awarded for this area and how much is left?
Beacon was awarded $500,000, and we have maybe $350 left at the least. I haven't done a claim for March yet, or February yet, so I'm not sure. It could be down to, a normal claim for us is probably $20,000 a month, if not more. So and that's doing back rent, rent going forward, and that kind of thing. So, and I'm not sure about what New Hope's finances are. I know they were awarded $150,000. So yeah, we got a big chunk of it gone. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And so this is, for the folks who might not be aware, United Way actually with Prosperity Indiana recently produced a Shelter from the Storm roundtable report where they actually kind of interviewed people who are service providers, advocates, and people who are in the community addressing a lot of housing instability issues. And I think one of the things that's interesting I mean tragic is even before COVID times, Indiana was much higher than neighboring states in terms of the number of evictions that we have been experiencing. And in particular, we're starting to see some families disproportionately affected. Black households are disproportionately affected. Latino households throughout Indiana are disproportionately affected, and people with children are disproportionately affected. What are we seeing here in Monroe County in terms of people who are at most risk of facing these evictions?
That's a hard one. I don't have a breakdown of that kind of thing. Of most of mine are people that are working, the basic $10 an hour jobs. So I don't have a breakdown of anything.
And so I think that seems to align with a lot of what we're hearing in terms of a lot of service employees, a lot of restaurant workers. Judge Stafford?
I was going to say that I have two thoughts on that. One is just anecdotally, because I don't have great stats on this. I would say the most vulnerable population right now for eviction are people with mental health challenges. It's making it difficult for them to coordinate with their landlords, and they are having, I think they're the first to be let go in an economy like this. And I'm really seeing those kinds of concerns in a great number of the cases before me, and I'm very sad to see that. And second, I think this points to an overall challenge for our court systems in Indiana in terms of how we keep statistics. We were very fortunate at last month's Bench and Bar Conference for Monroe County to hear a presentation from Professor Janine Bell of the IU Maurer School of Law on race and the civil and the criminal justice systems. And one of the things that we talked about as part of her presentation was how we can keep stats and how we can keep track of these sorts of things. And I can't tell you how many people where evictions are filed are Black, Indigenous, people of color. I can't tell you how many people have minor children in their unit. I don't simply have a way to track that right now. And that's something that I think we really need to do a better job of in the courts. And that's a challenge for us because every county in the state is required to use the software provided by the Indiana Supreme Court for our cases. So we have to kind of work within that software and what it can do to help track our cases. And that's something we're really focusing on here at a local level to try to see what we can do to add on to that to help track, because I think we don't know what disparities there are for sure until we can track that information.
So I've got some other questions that are coming in. Scott Nicholson has a question saying, to what level of being at risk of being evicted must a tenant be for the tenant to be eligible for assistance funds?
So it's under 50% for the program we are. It's somebody that's area median income is under 50%. So somebody with I don't have my area median income guide with me right now, but so somebody with a family, I'll say a family of two, or a family of three, I think is in the range of $23,000 a year, which is not a lot for a family of three. So yeah, so that's what we go by.
a question on that because that came up, that's come up a couple times with me. For area median income then, are we looking at the state of Indiana AMI, since that was what was produced by the ICDA, or when there are different counties that are served by New Hope and Shalom, are you looking at those actual localities?
We're looking at each county.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
I have them for each county. So I'm just talking about for the ones that I know the best are Monroe County.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm going by right now, but it is 50% of AMI for the counties. So, and then have the loss of income or, child care or something like that. So, yeah.
So Council Member Isabel Piedmont Smith also has a question. Are landlords using other reasons other than non-payment more frequently in order to pursue eviction?
Again, I don't have great statistics on this. I would repeat a little bit of what I said earlier, which is that I think most of our landlords are frankly trying to do their best in a really difficult situation. And as an aside, the moratoria have been really, really difficult, especially on our smaller landlords, many of whom are small mom and pop businesses in this area. And they cannot evict somebody for non-payment. And they have somebody who's now been there sometimes for a year without paying rent. They're really suffering. I've seen repeat landlords in my court on a weekly basis who are really struggling because this is their only source of income in retirement. Maybe they're disabled themselves. So this has far-reaching implications for both tenants and landlords. But yes, I am seeing some claims for emergency eviction that I don't think I would have seen in non-COVID times. And I think that's something that is up to the judicial discretion. I know that Judge Crothy and I both take a careful look at them. And if we don't feel that it meets the definition of an emergency just based on what was put on their pleading, then we set it as a regular eviction rather than as an emergency eviction. And typically in Indiana, or at least in Monroe County, we give about 10 days between the time an eviction is filed and the time it's set for court. And right now during COVID, the Indiana Landlord Tenant Task Force has suggested that we put that 30 days out instead. And that gives the landlord and the tenant time to do 3 different things. They've always had the power to negotiate directly, and we're really encouraging that right now. Maybe they can come to their own agreement on a payment plan or a voluntary move out. We're really trying to get the word out that that can happen. One of the things that HEP has been able to do is to help create a summons packet that we send out, Judge Crothy and I, with every new eviction filing to every defendant, to every tenant. That includes a letter from us on how the small claims process works. It includes a flyer for HEP with that phone number that keeps ringing for Tonda. And it includes a list of the township trustees and other resources. So we're trying to get that information out early to people so that they can negotiate. The second thing they can do is they can mediate through CJAM for free before they come to court. They don't have to wait for their court date to do that. And the third thing they can do is through the Landlord Tenant Task Force, the Indiana Supreme Court has set up a facilitation program where they are paying attorneys across the state to do remote facilitation, which is kind of like mediation. And it's free for the landlord and the tenant to try to help them work out a deal. So we have those 3 options. And that's something that I would like all of the parties to take advantage of. Something I repeat over and over is that we can't handle the increased capacity of Monroe County court needs without raising our budget unless we can use these forms of alternative dispute resolution and reduce the number of court cases coming into the building. And the more we use these alternative dispute resolutions, the better for the parties and really the better for the taxpayer. And so I'm trying to do whatever I can in these kind of unusual cases like small claims cases to really increase mediation and facilitation.
Mm-hmm. No, excellent. And these questions keep coming in, which is great. I love to see this great level of participation. So thank you. And we have a question from Abby Yang. Is HEP going to run out of grant funding at some point? And if so, what do we do next?
Yes, and I don't know. We are already almost out of our court reform grant. We were unsuccessful in a couple of recent grant applications. We are having a summit meeting tomorrow afternoon to try to take stock and see where we are. But yeah, we are really low on funds. And I would really like it if we weren't.
Tonda, do you have anything to add or?
No.
Okay. And my colleague at PACE, Lisa Marie Napoli, Since you've mentioned CJM, you've mentioned a lot of these other resources that are so important. She mentions that that the programs are so helpful. How do folks in the community learn about them? And is there any particular outreach that you engage in that you find most effective?
Well, I would credit things like Abby Eng's Mutual Aid for Monroe County Facebook group as a great way of getting the word out. We frequently put things on Facebook about HEP, and that gets the word out. We have had some great news coverage from the HT, from the IDS, from B Square Beacon, from the Bloomingtonian. Limestone Post has covered it. So we've had a lot of information out there about HEP, and that's one of the reasons that we do that summons packet out to tenants who are directly affected by this. As soon as there's a lawsuit filed in small claims court asking for an eviction, we send that letter out, and it has all of those resources in it, and we're really trying to make sure that gets sent out. I would really like it if that letter could get sent out to people before the eviction is filed, but we don't know their name and address first. So we don't really have a way to do that. So we're really trying to get that information out. Anything that anybody has as an idea, I welcome. You can email me, cstafford@co.monroe.in.us. I'll put that in the chat here in a minute. If you have other ideas on how to get the word out, shoot them my way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're trying to, like Judge Stafford said, we have used media to get our information out. One of the way to apply is indianahousingnow.org, and that's to apply for assistance. That program has actually changed a little bit. It's in a different department. It's nothing that we're responsible for at this point. It's considered the Indiana Emergency Rent IRA, so ERA, Emergency Assistance, and it's through the U.S. Treasury Department. So, but it's indianahousingnow.org. So.
I think that word of mouth, a lot of the calls that I'm getting, because again, we've been here, the program it's almost 2 years now. We started June 2019, prior to the pandemic, where we had a table in the Justice Building as people were showing up for their initial eviction or damages hearings. You would walk past a table of people providing resources. You could walk in for your court hearing and you had a free attorney if you were interested that could provide you advice. If the parties might be interested in mediation, there were mediators there on call that you would be meeting with. And then for other people that, especially if they're coming out of that, as they're coming out of the courtroom and they just found out that they might need a place to live in 10 days or less, they had somebody that they could talk to at least that would be able to help provide them. So that word of mouth about the program that's been out for close to 2 years has really been how I'm getting a lot of the calls coming in to me. Either it was a neighbor or a prior defendant. Social service agencies are now sending people to the HEP line. We're getting referrals from hand inspectors if they're out providing an inspection and a tenant or a pro se landlord has questions. They have a number that they can provide because obviously they're not there to answer those questions. They're there to do their inspection. We've been getting a lot of calls and referrals from the township trustees, which has been great. And then people still see flyers. It's been a little bit since we've gone around town and posted flyers, but I'll get people that are calling because the flyers on the courthouse door, or they saw it in the library. So the calls are coming in from a variety of areas, and I think it'd be really, as we continue to look at what the solutions can be and what shifts that need to be made within HEP, I think it's really good, especially with our meeting tomorrow, to be able to assess what the need is and to be able to publicize that more. There are going to be some shifts in how we provide our services because, just like anything, you learn what you're not doing as well and you work to do better. You learn what works and you you focus on that. Judge Stafford had put her email address here in the chat, which is wonderful. I think that any suggestions and solutions that people in the community might have, they're definitely going to be looked at and listened to.
I also want to just extend a broad invitation. Court is public and anybody is welcome to attend a hearing at any time. And I absolutely want to extend a personal invitation to everybody here or anybody who may see this later or hear about this later. Come watch an eviction and damages hearing. Mine are on Thursday afternoons, starting at 1. Typically we're done by 3, but sometimes that gets closer to 4. I hear evictions for the first hour. That's the hearing that decides whether a tenant has to move out or not. And then from 2 to 3, I hear the damages hearings, which is a hearing that happens 2 months after an eviction to decide who owes whom what for late rent, damage to the unit, attorney fees, etc. And it is amazing how we have been able to make this all work by Zoom. The participants are fantastic. We have Zoom breakout rooms. We probably have 12 of them any given eviction hearing, but you can Zoom in and watch evictions and damages at any time. I am personally out the next 2 weeks because I have a child with some healthcare issues that I'm going back and forth to Indy every day. But starting probably at the last week of March, just email me and I'll get you the Zoom information and you're welcome to Zoom in. We'd love to have you.
Wow. Yeah. Well, just certainly wish you the best with the healthcare issues, and if you could send also those times. Actually, I think that would be an incredible experience for a lot of folks here to be able to kind of tune into that. And I think it's certainly something that people would probably get a lot out of, the opportunity to really kind of see some of these hearings as they go through. So thank you. Everyone for all these incredibly valuable resources that you're bringing up here. Carlene Quinn from the School of Social Work, questions like, if you can recommend one approach, one change in the approach towards evictions, what would that be? Tonda.
I would say the expungement of certain evictions. The quicker that we can start that process and move it through legislature, then that it's not going to immediately help people now, but the effect that it will have for people in their housing in the future is going to, I'm not even sure if we'd be able to track all the positive impact that would have. I think that that's something that we should be focusing our attention on. Some of us that are involved here and other areas that provide these services are not in a position to lobby or to spend time during their work time doing that work. But any of you that are in that position and think that we should be doing what we can to preserve housing and allow people to not have those barriers to housing, I think that's a great place to start researching and focusing your time and energy.
I would just piggyback on that with a comment that in Indiana, you can expunge a DUI. You can expunge a lot of different crimes. You can even now expunge a civil action of an order of protection if you've committed domestic violence. You can get that expunged, but you cannot expunge an eviction in the state of Indiana. That is just there permanently. And in this age of information, we used to joke back in the 80s about this going on your permanent record. It's out there. That's the permanent record. It's the internet, and it's on there. It's on mycase.in.gov, and every landlord knows to look there. And I can't blame them. If you have a tight rental market and you have a choice between 2 tenants and one had an eviction 10 years ago and one didn't, that's an easy choice for that landlord to make. The thing that I would add is that I would like us to have some sort of mechanism for people to resolve this before they have to file for eviction. And that's become more difficult with the Indiana General Assembly bill on that prevents, in essence, a lot of local control of housing regulation. And I can't comment on that bill very much. I'm very limited in what I'm able to say as a judge. But I will say that evictions can be very different depending on whether you're in the city or the county, because the city has regulations about move-out inspections and retaining them that the county just simply doesn't have. And I know the county health department has been very focused on COVID over the last year, and I certainly respect that. And I understand the county's reluctance to put regulations in place, given the budget issues that they'd have to enforce them. And I completely understand and respect that. But right now you have many more rights if you're in the city than if you're in the county. Although with the state changes, I don't know how long that will be the case. But I would love to see a mechanism for people to be able to resolve an eviction by mediation as a required pre-step to filing a case.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that, it's interesting that you kind of bring up the differences between city and county. And, we've heard from Isabel Piedmont Smith earlier, and we've got a couple questions from some county elected officials here that I'd like to bring to you. So Penny Githens, Commissioner Penny Githens, asks, is there a mechanism in place to help landlords who may be facing bankruptcy because they can't make their mortgage insurance and property taxes payments with no income from the renters?
As far as I know, the only resource available is if their tenant can get help through the types of programs that Ms. Harrison and Ms. Radewan have talked about. And that's why I'm so thrilled to have those kinds of programs out there, because those mom and pop landlords are desperate. I mean, I have literally had landlords crying in my court because they're worried about losing their housing because they're not getting income from their rental housing. It's a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think to add, Amy, if you were going to speak to that, you were muted too. There is a difference in this new emergency, the ERAP, Emergency Rental Assistance Program, than the prior program that was available in those fundings through the state. I think now, because of the money coming from the U.S. Department of Treasury, and also that part where you look at see what wasn't working in the program, for the ERAP now, you can be a landlord and start initiating that process on behalf of your tenant. The restrictions on landlords and property managers receiving those funds are a little bit more flexible. What was happening prior to this, I guess, new rollout or new program is we would have several tenants from some, 2 or 3 particular landlords that would apply for funds. They would be approved for funds, $2,000 up to $2,000, and their landlord or property manager would choose not to be involved in the program and accept those funds. And so that was always very difficult when somebody was approved and they qualified for that funding based on their circumstance, which was due to loss or work related to COVID-19. And their landlord or property manager did not want to accept the up to $2,000 that they were approved for, that would go towards their arrears, and that was not an option for them because somebody didn't want to be in the program. I'm glad when the guidelines rolled out that there was a little bit more flexibility there. I think, Amy, that now if your landlord is not going to be involved with the program or participate, then you can actually have that option to get the funds directly from the state versus the last, at least it says that in the program materials.
That's the IEA, the ERA, right? Because that's not with my program. So I'm not well versed with that, since it's not one that I'm responsible for. So I haven't read up a lot on that program itself, because it's a different funding source. So I'm yeah.
So the Emergency Rental Assistance Program through the U.S. Department of Treasury is not one of the programs. I apologize. So that's not one.
Okay. No,
so you're talking about a different funding stream that comes through. And got it.
Yeah,
I understand.
So I did the first and second rounds, and this is the third round, is the one with the IERA. So
got it.
Yeah.
I have information for those that want that at a different time for the emergency for the ERAP. Okay.
I find that landlords are more willing in my program to work with us because they know the money's going to be coming, and so we've had success with that. I think I've only had one landlord that has refused to work with us, and then we can't work with that person. And I think that there was some extenuating circumstances besides just being behind on rent, and I think that was their excuse to not want to have them living there anymore. So
if I can just throw in that is a great way to emphasize that it's so important for both parties to show up to court. Obviously, if the landlord doesn't show up to court, I'm going to dismiss the case. But if the tenant doesn't show up to court and tell me, hey, I tried to apply for services and the landlord wouldn't take them, that's very compelling evidence that Judge Crothy and I would want to know before making a decision on that case. And if the tenant doesn't show up, the landlord presents the case on how much damage there was to the unit, and the tenant doesn't have a chance to say, no, that was there when I moved in, and have us compare those move out inspections to the move in inspection. So it is really, really helpful. We probably have in eviction cases, and Tonda, correct me if you disagree with this, because I don't have great stats on this, but I would say 75% of tenants or so show up to the eviction hearing, but maybe only 25% or fewer show up to the damages hearing. And that's where the amount of money. Go ahead.
I would agree with you on those numbers. From when I'm talking with the tenants, whether at checkout or if they're calling the line, often it's because they didn't receive the notice of the hearing or the instructions for the hearing. So I think a lot of the tenants aren't showing up because they don't have the information for the hearing, and which is, I know, one of the things that we're also looking at in order to improve. But yes, I agree that it's about the 25 to 30, 40 that you mentioned.
If the tenant doesn't show up, then I make a default judgment based on what the landlord says.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's certainly valuable information. County Council Member Kate Wiltz has a question relative to the numbers that Judge Stafford shared on normal number of evictions per year. How many would you expect if and when the CDC moratorium were lifted? And I know you mentioned earlier you don't have, if you had a magic 8 ball to look into April, you'd probably have a bigger picture, but if there's some sort of estimates that you'd be able to provide.
I would say that until just the last couple of weeks, we still had enough room in our calendar that we were scheduling cases in April. So we're still meeting that, setting them about 30 days out mark. And just for point of reference, I hear evictions for an hour on Thursdays and damages for an hour on Thursdays. And with Zoom, we have had to make some changes. So we're doing, instead of 15 cases per hour, we're doing 3 cases per 15 minutes. So I can hear 12 cases a week. So right now, we haven't seen the deluge. I haven't seen a huge increase in filings yet. I haven't had my staff or the clerk's office come to me and say, oh my gosh, we are swamped. Back in the fall, Judge Crothy's predecessor, Judge Bankert, and I discussed whether we could add slots to our calendars. And the problem is that cuts out all the other kinds of cases. There are only so many hours in the day. We have emergency protection order hearings that Judge Crothy and I both hear. We have provisional orders and divorce hearings. We have urgent child custody modification issues. And of course, those have been coming up with increased frequency because of COVID-related disputes between the parents about parenting time and exchanges. And we just really couldn't find another hour where we could reliably hear these cases, not to mention that would be in effect asking HEP to double their services or triple their services. And that simply isn't possible given that we don't have increased grant funds. So right now, knock on wood with both hands and maybe some feet, we haven't seen it yet. It may be coming, and I don't have a great answer, Councilmember Wiltz, on what the result will be. I think Tonda's probably correct that it's going to go up. I don't know by how much.
Okay. And while we've got so many wonderful questions here, and I wish we had a lot of time. We're coming to the end of time, but I do want to touch on a couple other questions to what extent we can. David Cook, mentions that you're all so much in the trenches and dealing with the consequences of the economics of COVID and reduce unemployment. But we want to ask for a quick comment on a key issue that we have in this area, which is the lack of affordable housing? And how does this play into the number of evictions that we see in this area?
I will throw out a real quick answer and then leave room for anyone else to respond. We have some landlords in town who don't have great reputations. And I'm not going to name names. It's not my place. But I will say that those landlords are the ones who will take people who have had evictions before. And when the tenant goes to them for that housing, often the housing has concerns. There might be mold, there might be sewage problems coming back up the pipes, there might be unsafe electrical work. There are other problems that can happen. And the lack of affordable housing and the lack of an ability to expunge an eviction really forces some people into unsafe living conditions. And that is heartbreaking.
And oh, Amy, did you have something to add?
I was going to say that I agree with Judge Stafford that so there is no like $100 to $400 rentals in town, which is what people that are experiencing extreme poverty would be able to afford. Right now, SSI is their base pay is $781. And so if you want to get an apartment that, as Judge Stafford said, is safe, you're looking at something that's $700. So somebody can't live off of $50 a month. So I totally agree that there is affordable housing issues in our town, in our county. So
yeah. Well, we do have one question. I think this is pretty timely. Oh, Tonda, I'm sorry. Did you have some bad or? Okay. The House just passed. Again, it looks like ready for signage. The $1.9 trillion COVID relief package that the president is expected to sign. I realize that there is certain amounts of funds that come for rental assistance. Are we likely to see benefits from that package, or what might some of the consequences of that federal relief bill be for residents in Monroe County facing eviction or facing housing instability?
I think it's going to be a good thing because people with children are going to be able to get $300, I think, per child. So that's going to help with trying to find daycare for their kids and being able to go back to work. So I think that's going to be a good thing for parents to be able to provide for their children and still be able to go back to work and be able to take care of their families. So I think it's very positive.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So and we have a question as well from Vanessa McClary of Cornice. Why are landlords able to offer unsafe housing?
Maybe they don't live in the city and they live in the county. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I think Judge Stafford had passed that on, where if we don't have a mechanism where that structural integrity and electrical work and the places that are in place right now are the functions that are in place right now through the city to be able to do that, then that can't be enforced. If you only have $400 to pay for housing, you're going to more than likely pay for inadequate housing so you have a roof over your head, because it is much better than trying to live in your car if you have a car. So landlords are able to do that because renters are paying or are going to pay. People are in a desperate situation when it comes to housing, and that's not even just at the 400 level. We're talking 600, 700, that people need housing, so they're going to take that rental knowing there's issues with it, because that's that immediate need met, and then they can work on the other things. It's hard to get a job if you don't have an address. It's hard to you can't, if you don't have a permanent stable housing, you can't have your kids with you. So there's just a lot of reasons why that's happening and how they can, and most of it is because they're getting renters. So they can keep doing it because there's going to be someone there that's going to want that rental if the other person leaves.
All right. Well, thank you. Is there, we are right at about time. Are there any final words? If there's like a 2-second snapshot you'd like to send our audience away with?
I just want to thank United Way and PACE for putting the series on. I think this event was the last one I attended pre-COVID, and we were all starting to do the elbow bump instead of handshake. So I really appreciate the sense of community that you all have helped us maintain during COVID by having these go on, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for being here. This is a wonderful discussion, and related to this, on April 8th, we will be back here building on this theme with a talk on homelessness and housing insecurity. So I hope to be able to see you there. I want to again thank our sponsors, the Bloomington Township, IU Credit Union, Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, Duke Energy, Old National Bank. Thank you, Tonda, Judge Stafford, and Amy for being with us today. This information is so incredibly valuable. I know that I've learned a lot in the last hour, and I believe that a lot of our attendees have as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Stay dry out there, and we look forward to seeing you next time.